So, welcome everyone. Today it's going to be all about policies, policy generation, and we have our special guest star today, Vincent, who's going to take us through that and make it engaging and interesting. So, I'm really looking forward to that. Please go ahead, Vincent.
Cool. Or I think the easiest way to do it is, oh, you guys see my screen? Visible, beautiful. So today it's about policies. I think in the last bootcamp, um, Bodhi also did this one. It was a little bit shorter. Let's see if it's today also a little bit shorter, since I'm doing it today. So, but this time we're gonna do it policies, and I think the concepts of policies is pretty straightforward. But homework-wise, it might, might be a little bit more. And basically, what we want to do with policies is the policies, what we do with them is they're going to define how we are going to implement and maintain information security. So we just did the risk assessment. Even if you didn't complete it fully, then at least let's assume that you did most of the risk assessment. And from that point, you kind of identify, hey, what are my gaps? Where do I have specific risks? And then you need to create policies, which basically um, tend to act as like a written record of, first of all, where you want to be. So what kind of security state do you want to get? And in a lot of cases also to maintain what you already have. So if you're already doing certain practices very good, it's also good to write them down. So, in 1 or 2 years, you don't accidentally break them. So it's also to solidify them. When it comes to compliance, these policies are always mandatory because an auditor cannot, they cannot audit you without the the policies itself. And for these policies, they also want you to have records. So they want to make sure that you have records to make sure that you comply to your own policies. Good example, for example, is if you have an asset management policy where you state, hey, these are the ways I'm treating my assets. I make sure that all my assets are documented, that we don't have any assets laying around somewhere that we don't know about. Then the least thing the auditor wants, hey, do you have this asset list? Are you maintaining it? How often are you maintaining it? Are you keeping the information according to what your policy says, etc. None of these records are shared with external parties, only with your auditor. See. Yeah, so this will be, you need to set some time aside for this one. It will be a little bit textual. For some people, it will be a little bit boring. I think it can be really interesting if you do it the right way, if you really start thinking about it. And very often, once you did it, you're going to be pretty happy. Because once these policies are set in stone, and 1 year in the future, somebody comes back and asks you why you have this certain control or why you're have this certain practice, then you can always refer back to your policy and don't get in an endless debate on why you're doing certain things the way you're doing them because you have described it in your policy. So this was the meme that Bodo came up with last time. I think this one is pretty solid. I cannot see for me, I cannot read it completely, but I think this another one is also a very good one. It's a little bit frustrating to do the policies in the beginning, but once you're done, yeah, it's really nice. And that's the homework. So the homework is going to be go through all these policies through the cyber task, and I will show you how to do that. And then we will go through them one by one, describe them, and if you have any questions, yeah, you can just send them to us, or we can. I think if you bother Bodo enough, she will always answer them, or I can answer them. But okay, I think it's good to dive in. So once you're into CyberJuice, I have my own CyberJuice company here. We can do these policies through CyberTask, and this is gonna make making policies a lot easier. I created for many companies policies from scratch. It's a freaking nightmare. But yeah, once you do it with CyberJuice, it's gonna be very, very easy. And the way you do that is you go here to Cyber Task, and then you can click any of these tasks here. For example, we have I think the password policy is a very nice policy to start with because it really speaks for itself. And then you will start the process. And it's already way nicer than how you normally would create a policy because normally you start from scratch and then you just need to, like, you have no clue where you even need to start writing. Now, CyberJuice will give you a little, for each policy that you do, it will give you some description on what it is and why you need to have it. In this case, it's the password policy, and we want to protect against weak passwords because we all know that, yeah, hackers mostly target passwords. And this keeps coming up, by the way, back in the reports like the Verizon data breach report, that the main way hackers basically come in is mostly by stealing passwords and reusing them at other applications. Now, just for that, knowing that fact and learning that fact, you will get some confetti. So if you have never written a password policy before, which we're gonna act like we do now, then we're just gonna say no here. And then we're gonna go into the suggestion. And here you see is where normally you would do this policies from scratch. Here we will go through step by step for each policy, for each part of the policy. So the first part we hear is the purpose, the scope, and the users. And CyberJuice comes with a suggestion. For example, the aim of this policy here is to create strong and good passwords. Everybody within the company and all company systems need to comply. Now, here it's good to to give some scope. I've seen for some companies, for example, it's good in the scope to include everybody. I also seen cases where maybe you want to start up with a sub-department or with a smaller scope. In this case, I think in most cases, I recommend just to take everybody. So then you keep all employees, all other users, the access information system of the company. Now you can change the name to your own company name, whatever you prefer. So in my case, I'm called Vincent's Fresh Company. What you also can do is you can take this part, if it's not really your style, you can rewrite it in a style that you like. Like this tends to be a little bit more formal because a little bit more formal language works with everybody. But if you like it a little bit more casual, just rewrite it. So for example, what I have here is I have ChatGPT open, if it stays open. And this is one I sometimes use to recreate my own voice. So let's see what it comes up with if I just put in this little piece of text. And here it comes up with this new text. So we can just copy this. I think we place it here. And now we have this part written more in a style that I would like. You can do the same if you have your own ChatGPT or you want ChatGPT to make it a little bit simpler. Or if you just, if you know how to write, you can do it yourself. And this goes for every part, every section of the policy. Where you want to pay a lot of attention to is mostly here to the password policy guidelines. In other policies, it might be other guidelines, but here you want to be a little bit strict because you want to understand what you're putting here. So, for example, in our case, we want single sign-on on all supported platforms. I'm not really sure that counts for you guys. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. If you have like Microsoft and you use it and you can make sure that it works everywhere, then it might be a good idea to leave it. But maybe, yeah, maybe you don't have single sign-on technology. Maybe for now you want to keep it out. It's not relevant. And then we have here guidelines for our passports where we say we want at least a minimum 14 characters. We refer back to the NIST standard. It might be a good idea to then at least research what the CIS standard is, because if you're not aware with it and a user might ask questions about it, then it's good to know it. And then you check, hey, do we think this is necessary? In most cases, I would just take what the suggestion is. I think the suggestion mostly fits, so we're keeping it here. For example, another one that might be debated is, for example, this one here. Passwords must expire within 12 calendar months. And that could be because technology, not if all the technology supports this fact. Especially if you work with technology that doesn't support this fact by majority, maybe you want to keep it out because it might be hard to implement. Another reason is because maybe in your company it doesn't really work that well. Like I've seen companies, for example, I worked once for a mining company and they had that they needed to let their passport expire every 12 months. And what tends to happen with, the kind of employees that were there is they would generally make the passport worse every year. It wouldn't get better, it would get worse because they just couldn't remember it. So what would happen is instead of them using a very strong passport, they would use their home address because at the moment, when they were asked to change the passport, they just didn't have the mindset to come up with a good passport. And that tended to happen very often. So in their case, we actually kept this one out. In most cases, just leave it there in there. And we can do this for all sections. So here we go into the lockout. If you do a different policy, it might be a different kind of answer. But take care of what you put in here, because the good part is if you do it well, 1 year later, 2 years later, if somebody asks, there will be no problem. You know why you're doing the things you're doing. But everything you put here is also part of your commitment. So if you are not going to be committed to whatever stands there, it's best to leave it out. Or in case if you think it doesn't comply with your risk, because you think, in this area, in this policy, we have so many assets, we want to be more strict, or we have so many passwords, we want to be more strict. Then it's better to improve upon this policy. Because in the end, this is just a suggestion. And you can do this on every part. In the meantime, I think we're soon going to go to the second part of the policy generation. In the meantime, is there any questions regarding how to create the policy and go through these steps?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said the policy is set in stone, but if we want to change our minds, how are you going to show how we can change a policy? Like, should that be a big deal, or can we just change it whenever we want to?
Generally speaking, if you want to make a change, you can do it, but you often need to go through some kind of approval process. So in the case of if you have a management team, then most likely you want all the policies approved by management. But every time you make a notable change, and not if the change just implies spelling mistakes or something, but if you make a notable change, you should again go through the approval policy because it has impact on the company. So are they really set in stone? No, but you cannot just change them on the fly. I wouldn't just recommend changing, for example, here, like now all of a sudden everybody needs to have a password manager. And then, yeah, I wouldn't change
And then change your mind.
The impact is too big.
Yeah. So a lot of companies have like a review every year, right?
True. So apart from so you also need, that's what most compliancy demands, is that at least once a year you check, hey, is this policy still relevant? And to what capacity it's still relevant. I think generally speaking, it's once a year. I've seen in some companies where they were a little bit more, things changed a little bit faster. They would do it every half year. but I haven't really seen it much that it is faster than that.
Okay, thanks.
Then we come to the second part of the policy, and that is, or the policy generation, and that's about what kind of habits do you want your employees to have? What should they do? What should they do? And these are very interesting in the CyberJuice platform because once we define these habits, we can also use them later, for example, to question, hey, how well does our company do on these habits, and where should we improve? But for now, these are a list here in this case, all employees of which habits do you want your employees to have? For example, I never want any of my employees to share passwords with anyone. However, there could maybe be a reason why you want this. For example, there could be, for example, a sales department that always needs to share a password for some reason. If you think that's a valid exception on the policy, you can write it down here. And that goes for all of them. So I always prefer to everybody to have multi-factor authentication because that really shows, especially the latest report from Google really shows that it really helps. Comply with the password policy. Do I want them to store passwords in a password manager? In our case, I think we don't have a password manager and we are not planning to implement it. So we're gonna leave that one out for now. Then this one becomes obsolete because we don't want to do a password. We don't want a password manager. And we say never share password with anyone with an exception for whitelisted accounts. I don't think sharing is a good idea. Let's remove that. Never share passwords in an email. Never write passwords on sticky notes. Here, maybe you already have some impact. For example, let's assume that in our company we have people like I have my laptop and I have my password on sticky notes on my screen. That's not a good habit. So I will already not comply. Yeah, this already what I also mentioned, right? Like never include the name of your pet's name, kid's name, birthday, or other information. Especially if you rotate your password too often, it could happen that people are doing this. In our case, I think it's definitely good practice not to do it. Never reuse passwords. Now, without a password manager, it might be a little bit hard, especially because we have 30 different applications. So we're gonna turn that one off for now. Always ask if unsure. Always change the password once a year. In our case, we won't do that. And then you can also add your own habits, like what do you want your employees to have regarding the specific policy? So, for example, in a password policy, what would I let's say we have a big risk on one of our, for example, now actually no pretty good one. Let's say we have Microsoft, and we want everybody to always use Microsoft. Then we could also say, try to use Microsoft to log in into, or maybe it's better to say, always use Microsoft to log in to applications if possible. And that now becomes a habit. So this could, for example, mean if I log into GitHub, then you can choose to create your own account, or I can just use Microsoft, that you tell people to always use Microsoft. Another one I also sometimes see might be a good one is never use a personal email to create company accounts. It wouldn't be the first time that I saw people use a personal email on company assets and company products because they just used it on a SaaS product and they didn't really care, and they would just create an account with a personal email, and then later on you figured out they still have the personal email for that specific account. Now, once you have all the habits here, you can press save and continue. You can now do the same for developers. For example, a good habit would be never store passwords in a code base, or always use the secret manager to store passwords used in code. So these are more passwords or habits that you can ask developer specific to use. I can press save and continue. And then we can go to routines and security roles. So what we do here that's different is what are the events and routines that we want to do as security people to make sure that this password policy is implemented correctly, that there are no risks, open risks. So a good one could be that we say once a year we do a we do a MFA checkup where we check if everyone is using MFA. And then maybe in the description you can say because some applications don't allow automatic enforcement. So there are some applications where you just cannot automatically enforce employees to use MFA, but you can often check it. So then it might be good to once a year do a checkup. Hey, is everybody still using MFA? How often do we want to do that, and who should do that? Now, I think in our case, we want the IT manager to do it because he already has access to the system. It's more practical if he does it, and we want to do that. This is depending on risk. I mean, if it's regarding passwords and we have a lot of passwords, then maybe once a year is a little bit too late. A hacker can do a lot once a year, but monthly is just practically most likely not very nice. So we would say we do that quarter. Then again, we can also check for personal emails within applications. And like that, you can add a few events, routines that security people need to do in order to make sure that the risks regarding passwords are managed and under control. Then you can do close the gaps. So these are like one-time tasks you need to do to implement this policy. So in the case, now this time it's a bad example, but if we said that we wanted a password manager, then we could have said here, and we didn't have a password manager yet, then we could say implement the password manager. I think the IT manager is responsible for that, and we want that at least the end of the month. Now, that is one of the tasks. Maybe you want to do a general cleanup or checkup of current status of passwords and users within systems. Just to get like a ground zero checkup, like where do we stand right now? In this case, we let the CISO do that. So these are tasks that are not something you're going to do recurrently. You're just going to do them once to implement the policy, and once it's done, you're going to leave it alone. Now, in this case, we haven't implemented it yet. We have some gaps that we still need to fill. So in this case, but maybe we could consider we already implemented parts of the policy. So in that case, I'm a little bit doubtful should we put defined here on partially implemented. I think our users are pretty aware. So in our case, we say we are partially implemented. The only thing we're really missing in our case is the these two tests. So we say partially implemented. Here, come back. I think this comes back to the question you had, Bodil, over, how often do you want to revisit? Now, I think the password policy, especially with the current hackers, we want to do that every 2 times a year. We just think this is such a big policy, and we found so many risks in our risk assessment related to passports that we think this is really important. IT manager will be responsible for this policy, and you can also define what kind of classification does this policy have. You could choose either public, so you can share it with the other companies. You can do it internal only. In that case, it's just within the company. It's sensitive or very sensitive. I definitely think there is no sensitive information here. We actually want to share this with the public because we had some people asking, some partners asking about it. So we want to put it on public. I see that this one works out right now, but doesn't really matter all too much. And then we can press on save and continue. Here we already go into the approval step. So if you, in this case, you want to make sure that everybody is aligned. So you can choose who will approve this. Now, in my case, only I can approve it. So I will just say, you can approve it. I will now get an email, and in that email, I can approve this policy, and we can press save and finish. That's a really nice moment. Now we are juiced. I don't know. That's really good, but we now created this password policy. We can find this policy now back here in policies. So we see here that the password policy is sent for approval. In my case, I have gotten an email about it, but I can click on it. And since I'm the one that needs to approve, I can press approve here. And then we successfully implemented the policy. It's approved now. Now, if you want to, you can still download it as a Word document. Or this is what we talked about later, is if you want to make a new version, you can create a new version. You go back to the whole approval process. But now this won't be relevant. I think in most companies it will only be relevant most likely in half a year or a year. So that's how we create policies. And that's what we need to do with most of these cyber tasks here. You just need to go through all these cyber tasks one by one. You will create your policies. And then in the end, you will have a very nice list of policies here that you can use. Any questions from anyone regarding any part of the process?
I have one, yeah. Where we could put in our own habits. Can you delete those after you created those, or is it just like uncheck the mark, and then it just in there in the habits?
Yeah, so you can, if you created your policy already, then if you want to delete them, you need to create a new version, and then let me check where it was. Oh, then we need to press edit. That's going to help. Then here we can delete them afterwards. So here, for example, I don't want this MFA anymore. We can just remove it.
Okay.
And then of course, you need to go through the approval process again. But you can edit and remove habits or add new habits if you want to later on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sven, do you have any questions?
No questions. Looks good.
Beautiful. Then that's it. It speaks pretty much for itself. I think the system really nicely helps with that. Now you just need a juice one, Bodil. I don't know if you can make one Zoom do that.
I think I have to develop my own then. I haven't seen that. And you can make it juice,
Like
you can
a
make
nice
hearts and
hand
stuff.
sound. Yeah.
But yeah. Very cool. And with the habits, We have this special survey thing that we are going to look at next time. It's quite exciting. Yeah. Or maybe you want to give a little, say a little bit about it, Vincent, just to make
Yeah.
it make it
When
exciting
you
for next
mentioned it,
time.
I was like, I want to click
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, so next time what we can do is we go into the surveys, and then for our for the post that we can create, we will start sending out these surveys on these habits to the employees. So here we see the password policies, we see the habits, and we can see which questions we can ask our employees, and then we will see a score and we will see how well we're actually doing regarding passports. Which is, by the way, a very good assessment, especially specifically with this policy to check, hey, do we have any risks maybe specifically to passports? But it's a really, really, really interesting feature.
Yeah. I always get this question from companies after they're done with creating their policies. Then they always ask, okay, so this is all fine. The people that have been part of creating the policies, we understand it, and we have the technical controls we have implemented. But what about the rest of the organization? How are we going to get them on board? How are we going to communicate and make sure that they follow the policies? That's always the next problem that they face. And these habit surveys are a really big part of the answer to make sure that people understand what is expected of them in terms of the policies. So so instead of just say, read and understand this, you can make it more clear and actionable. What are the behaviors that we want you to focus on and to implement for yourself? And then measure how is it going. And then if something is not going well, it's not necessarily about going out and saying, whipping people, but it's a signal to go out and understand the root cause, like what is wrong here. Maybe usually there's a good reason that people are not following the policies, but it gives us at least the data so we can go out and talk with the right people, and if it's a special group that we need to talk with and understand what is the competing thing, what is the conflict, why is it not being followed, what is hindering this.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, the big part also with policies is once you create them and you implement maybe, your one-time task, maybe you implement a password manager or something else, these policies can become very still very quickly, right? Because people are not really looking at it. So these habits, I think they are one of the most crucial things about policies, because those are the dynamic parts that you want to keep track of. And normally I see many times that people just forget it because, they're not reading a policy every day. I wouldn't even, like definitely not on my favorite reading list. So then this really helps. This really helps to, even for yourself, to just stay on top of it.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool. Then I think good luck. There are many different kind of policies. So if you have any questions also maybe regarding content, maybe not through, the system, then let us know. Then we can help. Some topics might be a little bit more difficult, or you might not understand them completely, but we can just help.
Yeah, put your questions in Slack, because then we have more people who can help out. But also, Sven and Nicole, we're also gonna see each other a couple of times, so I can also help you individually. But please, if you're sitting stuck with something, just pop it in the Slack channel and we'll have a look.
Cool. How long did we make it? Not too long, I hope.
No, but we can give people back 15 minutes if we don't have any more questions. I think I'm going to stop the recording now.